You recall the infinite comment, the cutting up of it that I mentioned last week, in conjunction with my flippant observation that the yellow circuit could perhaps noun itself to death through such a process. I want to be sure that everyone understands that it's absolutely necessary for the infinite comment to be cut up, to have the yellow circuit cut it up into pieces. Absolutely necessary. There's no way around it. We would not be standing here. We could not talk at all. Humanity would not be in any manner fulfilling the function that is presently necessary. But for the few people, this cutting up, this necessary cutting up of the infinite comment destroys its secrets. Conversely, I suggest to you, is what is so often or sometimes been written about, sung about, dreamed about, claimed to have been experienced even by fairly routine men and women, wherein they're speechless, the so-called moments of epiphany and awakening, that they went through some process wherein what they saw was indescribable. And some of the people even go ahead and then spend 200 or 300 pages trying to describe to you why it is indescribable. But what I'm suggesting to you, among other ways to look at it, is why it is indescribable, is that they saw the infinite comment. In a sense, to continue my picturization, they read, they perused the infinite comment, but the yellow circuit was not cutting it up into the ordinary necessary pieces, and therefore, since they did not have the kind of background that I speak of, that I'm involved with this activity, the kind of background to establish so that when you do have such an experience, you don't feel as though you're a fish that has been thrown out of Detroit, out of water. They cannot say anything because, in a sense, they saw some of the secrets. But as long as you're letting yourself, as long as your sense of reality, as long as your sense of your own identity, your sense of consciousness, your sense of I, as long as it is based all the way from primarily to totally upon what the yellow circuit cuts up, that is, on all the ordinary lateral, linear, horizontal, sequential, rational knowledge, as long as that is the basis of your conception of you and everything else and not you, you're missing the secret, and you always will miss the secret. But what you got to remember is that it's necessary for the yellow circuit to do that. The only hope, using my descriptions right now, is that you can be conscious, as I keep suggesting to you, beyond the limits of the ordinarily wired up yellow circuit. You can be conscious without it being based upon speech. You can be aware of what's going on without it being limited to that which is rational, sequential, except you cannot prove it verbally. Because if you try to prove it verbally, that there is a reality that's nonverbal, then what you got? You're going to have that which is absolutely irrationally verbally. You're going to have that which is insane verbally. Also connected with this, I would like to, real sketchy, to dance over, to skate over a couple of areas. One, could you see that in a sense, humanity could be seen as being a part of life's infinite comment regarding itself? No? Well, you should. And if you say yes, you'd already thought about it, then you missed it. But there is a way in which you could see humanity, every aspect of humanity, everything that humanity has ever done, has ever thought, has ever said, ever felt, and of course at the same time that which you might think, or an ordinary sense of consciousness might think, that humanity has never done, said, felt, which is the same thing. But all of that can be seen as being a part of what would be the infinite comment to life regarding itself. Could any of you see that MV12 could be seen as a reflection of the infinite comment? Could any of you see that the primal flow being run through all of man's circuitry and then enriched could be seen, in a sense, as being man's own MV12? But if the primal flow could be experienced, if it could touch humanity in its original form, you would have nothing of any value, assuming that you survived it. It would have to go through all of the circuits. It would have to indeed be enriched. It would have to be anointed. It would have to be blood almost that had picked up traces of everything that had ever been done, said, or felt, and everything that had never been done, said, or felt. Then you would have enriched blood. Then you would have the primal flow in a way. You would have to look at it being, again, the infinite comment, the infinite non-transversible universe, that either the octane of blood had then gone through the ceiling, or else you had a blood that was neural octane, neutral. It'd be the same thing. You would have had to have picked up the traces, the molecular, the chemical traces of every possibility that humanity had ever thought, felt, said, and that which it had never thought, felt, said. Remember, I said all this, can you see that in a sense, can any of you see that in the ordinary world, those, and to those I'm about to refer to, are not your neighborhood butcher or cab driver. It's those that apparently are spokesmen for some spiritual, philosophical, religious cause. But that those that apparently, ordinarily, are most certain are those who understand the least, because they are firmly clutching to a cut piece of the infinite comment. And that is just as necessary on a smaller level than it is that all of humanity, as I started out pointing out to you, are necessarily driven to cut up the infinite comment into yellow circuit pieces. Now, just as everyone must do that to even find their way home and to ask for a half a gallon of milk and to do their taxes and to tell people that the check's in the mail, just as everyone at the ordinary yellow circuit level must operate on that basis, then on a more isolated basis are these figures, so-called prophets, religious leaders, enlightened ones, all sorts of names, those who seem to be certain, and those of you that can strike out a little bit on your own. You can also see this coming out in political areas throughout man's history. But when it reaches a level I'm talking about, such so-called political leaders or such so-called political events at the time had religious trappings, that there seemed to be a kind of insanity after the fact, looking back on it. At the time, the people were carried away by great waves of passion. But it is always based around someone who seems to have, now it's in an ordinary sense, no matter if they're apparently talking about extraordinary matters, but it's in an ordinary sense that they are most certain that yes, God talked to me. In fact, he told me, kid, call me Larry. He told me that, and he told me exactly what he wanted me to tell you, and told me exactly what's going to happen next month, world's going to come to an end 2 years from now. If you don't do what he told me to tell you to do, when you die, you're going to turn into cold zucchini. Something that is absolutely certain. Now, as many of you suspect, although it could have been just very mechanical, such people understand the least. They're serving a very real purpose. They may create a certain kind of following. It may expand, and it is absolutely, without any question, serving a purpose in life's own expansion. but they understand the least because they are firmly clutching. For those of you that from the southern hemisphere, they are firmly in the clutch of a cut-up piece of the infinite comment. Now you can jump from there back to the many people, back to the ordinary people, and although it may not be on the basis of you or someone else feeling as though you're a spokesman for the spirits and the forces, anytime that you're absolutely certain, no matter what it is, such as I, without any doubt, I am certain that liberal attitudes in the political arena, whether it be here, some other part of this planet, will eventually do us all harm and be the downfall of civilizations we know it, our conservatism. Now, all of you have got such demons in you. All of you have the 4 withal. Some of you have the 5 withal, and some of you are just frightened that you keep all that kind of crap hid around here, as you rightfully should. But some of you, in very weak, ordinary moments, some of these kind of voices come back. I know they do. And you will still entertain them under the right conditions as being serious. That in some way, certain ideas you have, politically, economically, nationalistically, something in you has certain ideas, certain molecular structures that can get turned on that you feel are exempt from anything having to do with this. That all of this seems to be a pretty neat, at times almost all-inclusive template that you'd never heard before, but that does not excuse these little beady-eyed, overweight, pig-headed conservatives throughout history are going to stop all progress and stand in the way of good people like me. You might as well be Hitler. You might as well be Jimmy Swaggart. You might as well be the Pope. You might as well, worst of all, you might as well just be ordinary. Anything that you are certain of on the ordinary level, and we don't have to debate that because there's not enough exceptions for me to even bother with, anything that you're certain of right now is on the ordinary level. If you're certain of it, then you are firmly in the clutches of what has been cut off the infinite comment. And it's not correct. It's an understatement, but I don't feel like right now I'm not warmed up enough yet to curse and wave my arms and shake the Bible or our Vade Mecum whenever we get it. I'm just telling you it's incorrect. And as I start out with this paragraph, those who are ordinarily the most certain understand the least. And that ranges all the way from some would-be soothsayer, political, religious leader, all the way down to you in any little corners of your demonic castles internally that are not flying anymore, wherein there are just 1 or 2 things that you're just absolutely certain of. Politically, economically, religiously. That about covers most of them. It's just a little form, as far as infinite comment's concerned, it's just a little form of insanity. It's not hard to find, it's just hard to accept. At the ordinary level, of course, it's impossible to accept. It just becomes at the best, it becomes a philosophical confrontation between something I said and something these little voices and you continue to hold on to. But anything of which you are absolutely certain in the ordinary sense, then you can just take my word for it, you're incorrect. It may be necessary, you may be in high cotton, you may be in good company, you may have a historical background of great thinkers or pig-headed thinkers backing you up. Or you may think that you thought of it. You may think that you alone discovered that there is an international banking conspiracy run by people from Cleveland. Whatever it is, and you're sure of it, there's just no doubt. I don't want to discuss it. I am sure people are coming here from other planets. It's probably them behind this Irish Catholic conspiracy coming from Cleveland of those people who are faking it, looking like they're Islamic, and it's all being come from Planet X. And I'm not even going to discuss it, because I can just feel it. I know it's true. You're serving a purpose. As far as I took my little example, you're probably serving a very, very small purpose. I doubt that you're going to start a major religion on that basis. But everything is serving some purpose, but you can count on the fact that it is incorrect. The only profitable, the only real secret with a capital S, or the word secret in quotation marks like all the would-be occultists and mystics want it, the only secret is the undisturbed infinite comment. It would be able to have, it'd be into another dimension, but what I tried to describe one time to a few of you is the reality behind what ordinary people call a photographic memory. And I'm not going into it again tonight, and it's no big deal, but a few of you years ago, I pointed out that you could get the brain molecularly shook up in a certain way. And the kinds of things that you may have read about, there seems to be these people with native talent to just look at something and remember it. You can, assuming that you physically, materially have your brain and nervous system already in fairly decent shape, there's a way in which you can look down at a page, and they picked a pretty good term, this whole thing about photographic memory. I used to think it should be called photogenic memory, but... And you could look down at a page and then look off and, in a sense, photograph the page. And you could go back and you could read it to yourself. It's not memorization, it's just look at it and almost go click and do it. All right. That wasn't even the point. That's still a comma there. Any of you who want to fool around with that, you can do it. All of you should be able to do it. Don't worry, once you do it once or twice, you'll probably forget all about it. But at any rate, that kind of thing can be done, comma. If you could take that into another dimension, and I use that term, I don't mean in some science fiction way, but it is outside the three-dimensional world of ordinary consciousness. You've got to be able to go at a right angle to that, to expand it. But if you could do that, that would be a kind of perusal, a kind of non-stop awareness of the infinite comment. We'll be able to just hit it all at one time. But it cannot be this continual process in which we are all tied at line level, at the ordinary level of yellow circuit consciousness. You are continually reading sentences. You're continually having to read across the page, and you try to memorize things that seem to be important to you, and you read them and you try to memorize it. Or you read them and you have some judgment. You read what somebody just said, some idiot. But it is a continual process. The yellow circuit is cutting up the infinite comment, as it should, as it must, at the ordinary level. Among other things, the yellow circuit could not get fed. It could not take the infinite comment. It would be octane in food. It'd be energy in food of such a level that the yellow circuit couldn't even use it. It has to be cut up. It's as though you've got a great father again. He's cutting up your food into little baby bites, and he feeds it to you. The yellow circuit. Of course, the yellow circuit doesn't exist. It's a function of life itself. But an awareness, a reality behind such ideas as being awakened and having moments of enlightenment or being enlightened, I am suggesting to you along the lines I'm depicting to you tonight, is you're able to look and you do not see sentences. You do not see nouns and verbs and periods. As you can see without looking. You can see without talking. You can see without commenting, or you can see without listening to your own internal comments. It would be as though, if you could go at a right angle to three-dimensional reality, that you can have a photographic memory. You don't try and memorize, and you don't sit at a page and read the first sentence and you repeat it. No. And then you read the second sentence. So you're able to look at it and you just swallow the whole thing. Then you can look off, and it's as though the page is still there and you can read it. It's not a perfect parallel, since there are none, but it would be that in the consumption. There's no word for it, of course, but the perusal of the infinite comment would be parallel to that, as opposed to trying to memorize a page sentence by sentence. It's just being able to look at it, and you know it. Next item. The secret word is Medivesco. Don't bother to look it up because I made it up. Medivesco. And in fact, by now, there may be a word for it in medicine or somewhere else. I'll admit there may be. I wouldn't be at all surprised, but I don't know what it is, and I didn't bother to check on it. It's not important. But here's what it is. And all of you are aware of this on a very superficial and sequential level. My definition, since it's my word, of Medivesco, and this definition is not even perfect, as always, but it's cure by inquiry. But with this caveat, you got to remember there's really no such thing as cures. It's really improvement by inquiry. It's really adjustment by investigation. I just like the sound of the first one I gave you of cure by inquiry, having a certain non-essential enjoyment of the sound of words at times. The definition, Medivesco, is cure by inquiry, remembering that there are really no such things as cure. We're talking about a prescription, a remedial action. But here's what it is. And the process has been known, except up until now, nobody's had any business dealing with it. It wasn't necessary, and as I said, as far as I know, unless it's happened recently, there's no real word for it. That's why I came up with it. Here's what it is. You've all had this happen. I'll give you 2 or 3 quick examples. You got a piece of electronic equipment, stereo or computer or something, and something goes out, and you fool around, you know what it is, and you take it to a person that has a sign saying, I'm in charge of repairing these. And you tell the person, they say, I understand what it is, and sure enough, they check what it was, some meter's not working. They run wires around, they check 2 or 3 places, and they say, well, it could be a number of things. I couldn't get on it now. Plus, they may say, well, it's going to cost X amount of dollars. You may say, well, never mind. And you take it home, and you plug it back in, and it works. Of a more personal nature, all of you know this. You're having symptoms, and for whatever reason, you finally decide, I should see a physician about these symptoms. And you go, he says, yeah, I hear what you're saying. And you say, it hurts here, I got this funny cough. And he checks you over, and he says, I've done everything that I know would be pertinent to the possibilities I think would be inherent in these symptoms, and I don't see any causal connection between what historically and medically has been known to be involved with such symptoms. In other words, as far as I can tell, you're in perfect health except for this little symptom. If I was you, I wouldn't worry about it. And you go home, by the time you get home, sure enough, not only have you not worried about it, the symptom is gone. It's cure by inquiry. It happens, I don't guess, judging from your reaction, I have to go much further. You can find examples in what would seem to be psychological areas, people talking about their problems, and you don't even have to go to an analyst. Somebody calls home and talks to their mother. Somebody goes down to a bar, some guy, and talks to his bowling buddy over a few beers about some problem just eating him up. People go and consult a soothsayer. People go and consult a priest, a rabbi, a so-called religious person with this great problem they're having. And the person may or may not give any indication that I am performing some act here. They may just say, well, I don't know what to do. I'll have to think about this. Or why don't you pray to the spirits and I'll pray with you. We'll see what happens. And by the time you get home, you already forgot about it. You get home and the electronics man said he couldn't fix it on the spot. He wasn't sure what was wrong. And by checking it is the only thing that happened. By checking it and agreeing with you that it doesn't work, and you got home and just plugged it down just for the hell of it, and it worked, that was the cure by inquiry. That and the other examples. Can anyone, since you do understand, you hear what I'm saying, but I'm telling you that there's a great deal more to it than that, to say the least, because we're dealing with everything that apparently is out of whack, everything that's out of plumb, everything that needs realigning, readjusting, which is what, according to ordinary consciousness. Let's all say it together. Everything. Everything. I'm not making quite enough money. I'm not quite tall enough. I'm not quite handsome enough. I'm not quite young enough. My car is not running quite good enough. My wardrobe is not quite up to date enough. I don't have quite enough food at the house to last over the weekend. I don't have just the right kind of etc. That is the nature, of course, of being alive. That is the nature of dealing with sentences. That is the nature of the yellow circuit nouning. Can any of you see? Some of you have already done this accidentally. That's why I finally bring it up. Well, accidentally. There are things going on that appears to be inside of you, that appears to be part of your own sense of existing, sometimes known as one's personality, one's soul, one's I, that there are things that need adjusting. As far as you and the partnership, you and the internal sounds are concerned, it's beyond any debate. Regardless of me standing up here and sometimes ostensibly, you think, putting out some kind of message that everything is as it is, and you got to learn to live with it, or you should be happy like it is, whatever it is that you take it for as the night, you and the partnership go, that's fine, and I wish I could go along with that. Maybe a lot of them can. But I got 2 or 3 meters in here. I got some gauges. I got a little piece of a carburetor. I got a float here. I've got a symptom. I got things that need adjusting. It may just be 1 or 2, but they are in serious need of adjusting. I was hoping that he would give me the adjustment. He would give me the secret. Maybe I'll find it on my own. Maybe I'll have one of these great moments. Or maybe I'll eventually will find somebody to give me the adjustment, the cure. Let me remind you, this is not playing with words, even though I liked my definition, the sound of it, of cure by inquiry. In life, as long as the yellow circuit is dealing with sentences instead of the infinite comment, you got to remember, literally, there is no such thing as a cure. All you're dealing with are prescriptions. There are no cures for anything that the human yellow circuit can define as a problem. They cannot be cured. Some of you might recall a parallel universe that I have mentioned before, wherein commentators throughout the history of man, the history of the yellow circuit, have pointed out problems of societies, whole tribes having problems, not just individuals. And what appears to be an insightful comment 6,000 years ago, yesterday, is somebody pointing out this manifestation, of course, is disruptive. As condemnable as it may be, is simply a symptom. The guy that stabbed his mother, my God, that's just a symptom. How long are we fools going to keep dealing with symptoms? We got to find the cause. There is no cause. The symptoms are the cause. In the same way that there are no cures, there are no prescriptions. The exception, if you want to call it that, that's possible, is to be able to see the infinite comment. Then, what I said about there are only prescriptions, not cures, is no longer true. Of course, it's also not true for me to say then there are cures. It's then there are no ills. So the question of whether you got a cure or a prescription is moot. There's nothing to be cured. To be able to see the infinite comment, it's not a matter that suddenly there are real causes instead of just symptoms. The infinite comment contains no problems. It contains no social ills, no injustices, no evil. And so you don't have to worry about, am I looking at a symptom or a cause? There's no longer the problem. There's no longer the limited vision. There's no longer the situation that you personally are dealing with pieces, that you're dealing with, in a sense, what turned out to be very mechanically but arbitrarily chopped up pieces that to you are statements of reality, which are to you are statements of you. You cannot separate the two. Can any of you see that you could use Metavisco on yourself? that you don't need faith healers. You may not need a rabbi or a priest. You may not need a supernatural force. If you can find the way to directly look at what seems to be your need for adjustment, for which you and the partnership takes it very seriously. It is not something open to some kind of just sort of off-the-cuff self-analysis or self-help. It's too serious, it's too deep, it's too long-rooted in you. I was trying to hint, but I'm just going to tell you, there are things in all of you. I could start naming names, people here and people out of town that I've met. I could start naming, saying, all right, right at the heart of where you feel like you really need adjusting, that you feel like that you wanted me or some supernatural force to take the great cosmic screwdriver and know which screw it is, which adjustment, and just go, don't, just like that, and you'd be happy. You would no longer have the great fear of blank. You would no longer have the nightmares that one day you might become a blank, that one day you might be accused of being a blank, or that one day this blank aspect of your personality is going to completely overwhelm you. That if it was just a slight adjustment and that was gone, it would be easy rolling. I am trying to hint to you as much as possible. There's a way in which you can use Medivisco, and that the apparent cure comes from simply the inquiry. Well, let's see what's wrong here. Every one of you, if you would listen to what I was saying specifically, and I could get a little more individualistic with it, as I said, and I could point out to you if you said, well, I'm not sure what mine is. And I said, well, it's based around you have the greatest fear that you think you're out of adjustment in this particular way. And let's assume that you could go, all right, you got me. Yeah, that's true. If you could do that on your own, and then simply take yourself into your own shop and lay yourself up on the counter and say, this doesn't seem to be working correctly. And then you also be the man behind the counter. Especially the electronics place. I love that kind of example. A guy with all the pencils, thick glasses, man who hadn't had any sex in about 2 years. He doesn't know whether it works or not. He's not even sure that you know how to describe it, but he says, sure, put it down here. And you put it down. He says, what was it? And you say, this meter doesn't work, and I'd like for it to work. He says, oh, okay. So he starts taking this tester and the little alligator clips, and he goes here and there. Sure enough, he may finally say, you're right, it doesn't work. And you say, well, and he might, well, from there on in, I've already been through it. He may say, I don't know, or it'd take me longer to go into it. He just says, you're right, it doesn't work, and I'm not sure what it is right now. If you could lay yourself up on the counter, and if you could step on the other side of the counter and say yes, and you said, I think I need adjusting right here, and you could be. What I was trying to describe, without saying the word, but I guess I'll have to, is rather an impartial inquirer. He just had a few minutes. He may not even be in the business of actually repairing such as this. He obviously doesn't care whether your damn meters work or not, but there he is behind the counter and you ask. He probably doesn't believe that you know what you're talking about. That's why most of them, if you don't know it, if you turn your head, most people that you take in electronic equipment, they may say, would you hand me that over there? And as soon as you do that, they hit it. According to the secret reports I got from that industry, that cures over 60% of all problems from TVs to computers to stereos and everything is you hit it good. So at any rate, if he gets you distracted enough or says, oops, and he drops some, would you hand it to me, and he hits your thing and the meter still doesn't work, then he might check it. But what I'm trying to use in my picturization is, he is pretty impartial about it. Now, if you could lay yourself in the place in which you need adjusting up on your counter, and then you could, on the other side of the counter, say yes, and then you say, I need adjustment. I need something that needs to be improved. It needs to be adjusted right here. And then you can step back over the counter and say, well, let's look at it. The only reason I went through all of this is I'm telling you that all of you, if you knew how to do it, could find out that there is an absolute reality, a reality that you can have some control over, some direction, is what I mean by Medivesco. That you can apparently cure it through inquiry. Well, let's look at this. The first thing you know, the problem is gone. That's a fact. Jack and Jill. It's been going on, as I said. All of you laughed almost as soon as I gave the first example. It goes on all of the time. But also note, nobody's ever thought that this has any importance. As I said, unless life has caught up with me just around the corner from yesterday, there's never been a word for it. And yet the phenomenon is known. All of you recognized it immediately. But just think, there's never even been a word for it. But everybody knows that sometimes your car won't run. You have to take off a day from work. But the light keeps coming, whatever it is, and you go there, and you stop by finally, and some mechanic says, well, I ain't got time to really fix it, but I'll take a look at it. And he goes in there, and he bangs around, and he says, what was it? And he hits this, and he kicks the car, and he spits in the radiator. And he said, well, you're right. I don't know why it's doing. You'd have to bring it back next week and leave it. I just don't have time to fool with it. And you get in the car and leave, hoping you'll make it home, and wherever the problem was, it's stopped. Everybody knows that. Things like that are not some accidental fluke of the universe. That is as real and as specific as many other things. And when you get to where you can recognize something is going on, you can recognize, in a sense, I'll use everyday terminology, you can recognize a continuing phenomenon going on in life. And the real good ones, when you know you're getting good, when you know that life is beginning, to pay some attention to talk to you, assuming that's what you want, is you recognize things going on that there's not even a word for. Not little people flying in from Planet X. And you say, wait, I can't talk to my friends at the bar because these people don't have a name. Not that. I'm talking about a phenomenon going on that people recognize. Like things getting fixed when somebody looks at them and says, I don't have time to fool with it, or I don't know what's wrong with it, and they fixed it, apparently. Everybody knows that, but there's not even a name for it. When you get good, you can start looking out, and there are things going on everywhere, as I've been telling you. Not ghosts, not spirits. There's phenomenon going on right here that you can materially see with the cones and the rods, that you can hear with the flaps and the speakers in here, that you can touch. It's going on right there, and people do not see it. And this is just one prime example. And it is extremely useful. You'd be surprised that you can make what it literally amounts to quantum leaps over places you think you need adjusting by simply inquiring into it, and let me look at that in the right way. Well, you can't even hardly do it wrong. But to actually, just to actually inquire into, well, it seems as though I have been out of adjustment. There's been sounds coming out of me up here, talking to me all my life, that this needs adjusting. Well, I got a few minutes. Let me see if I can fix it. Let me look at it. And you may find yourself a recipient of that brand new phenomenon, metavisco, that it got cured by inquiry. I'm saying this, I keep saying hence. I'm telling you that there are ways to directly, absolutely use this that verge to the yellow circuit, would verge on miraculous. Except there's another phenomenon without a name. That which somebody can do to themselves, this miraculous, there's no name for. Notice, all things that are considered miraculous must happen somewhere between I and not I. It's always got to be something external. There's always got to be another witness to it. It's always got to be something that you can describe. I saw a miracle happen. I went to a tent meeting and I saw a guy half drunk and deranged, or like to me, with a cheap hair piece on, and he prayed for a person in a wheelchair, and they got up and did the boogaloo. It's miraculous. People claim they saw somebody walk on the water, do all sorts of strange things. They say that's miraculous. All right. That which goes on internally, that defies all of the internal partnerships, well, all it knows for the known laws that govern everything, there's not even a word for that. I don't think I'll make up one for tonight, but I can give you a description. It should be known as to a right-thinking person, it's the minimal expectation. It's the very least I demand. It's the very least I deserve. I expected no less. That was a little humor, so don't anybody get upset and write a Elizabeth Barrett Browning sonnet about such a sad affair. Continuation from last week of another matter. When I was pointing out that people do not see that statistically it's almost impossible to become rich and famous. As far as I've heard, there's been no reports of any of you committing suicide or changing careers or giving up your hobbies, but let me continue this a little bit. What I said was in no means, in no manner, pessimistic. It was not meant to discourage any of you that have good artistic hobbies, or just artistic hobbies, interests. It has nothing to do with abandoning such interests, because all of you should have some notion by now that I would absolutely do anything reasonable within my power to encourage you, any of you that have any sort of talent/interest, music, writing, poetry, fiction, trying to write a symphony, trying to write a hit song, painting, woodworking, dressmaking, computer programming. If you've got something that you like to do that nobody's paying you for, a real hobby, remember, and something that you can enjoy even without an audience, by God, you should be glad. You should cherish it. And what I said, to continue tonight, one of the reasons I brought that out is there are extended, continuing areas to which humanity is blind. And remember, we're now outside the ordinary realm of religion and psychology and social commentary, because there's nothing wrong here. We're not here now to suddenly condemn segments of humanity or you individually. But it's things to which people are absolutely blind that should astound you. Not because I pointed out, it should astound you, and then you should be asking yourself those kind of neuralizing questions. They're non-verbally, as to what is going on. Why are things arranged this way? What is life getting out of this? And one of them is, or one of the reasons I brought it up last week, is to look how many people, just in this group, look at in the world, how many people have an interest in any particular artistic area. Let's just use that. How many people on this planet, how many people in this country believe that they have, quote, the big novel in them? I think it's fair to say a lot of people. I think it's fair to say a lot of you believe, I hate to really be this crude, but let's take it down to a good level. I'll assume all of you are over this one now. But how many people in the world believe, if I could just sit down and write my life story, boy, it'd be a bestseller. People be lined up to read about the fascinating life I have led. Many people believe. You've all heard it. You've all, your own partnership has said it. You've read a book. You've read an excerpt from a book. You've seen a writer on a talk show. I could do better than that. This thing is number 2 on the bestseller list. Yeah. God, I know I could do it. All right. The world's full of people who sincerely believe that. But as I was pointing out to you, I want to make sure that you understood one of the things that I was pointing to directly. Statistically, no matter how good you are, statistically, there's almost no chance of you becoming famous. And by famous, I'm including it all. Becoming well-known in your field and well-heeled therefrom. Rich and famous. Whoever was considered right now the world's, if they could, somebody could conclude it, the world's greatest living contemporary novelist, the world's greatest 20th century painter, whoever you picked out, all of you should know by now, there were people around drawing like Matisse, Picasso. There were kids drawing like that. Whoever's considered a Norman Mailer, Updike, somebody nowadays would be considered just one of the prime examples of an American novelist. And you read it, and there's nothing magic about it. You may say it was entertaining, but hell, I could write that. I really could. There's no doubt about that. I'm not disagreeing with that. And how about even worse? It's a better example. All of you are aware of the fact, are you not, that with now, there are kids in high school, much less college, that can sit down and rewrite, brand new, I shouldn't say rewrite, write Bach fugues. There are people who sit down and write what would amount to a 10th symphony for Beethoven, an 11th one for Mahler, if you knew how he counted. There are people who could do that, but they're not going to get famous. They're not even going to get noticed. Statistically, it's almost impossible for one individual to become rich and famous. But it's not noticed. Ordinarily, people do not get morbifically discouraged. People can say they get discouraged, and they may finally give up writing. They may never even try it. They may just talk about it. They may go ahead and live out their days working in a hardware store. But what I'm saying is that over a wide spectrum, people who have an interest, people who work on symphonies, people who believe that they could have been a rock star, they don't just one day suddenly, in a sense that would approach impartiality, four-dimensional objectivity. They do not one day suddenly look around and say, do you realize statistically there are only right now, five artists that painters you consider to be rich and famous. There are only 5 novelists, and etc. That does not occur. Life, when it comes to being rich and famous, life at any given time and at every given place in this body, that is, going from different culture, different country, different tribes, life has a very limited need for rich and famous people. And once you see it, it's just as glaring. It's not open to debate. It would almost look like, if you want to push it, that the so-called rock era in music almost was about to become an exception or expanded it, such as all the trade magazines, the radios, stations. They continue week to week to talk of the top 100 songs in the country, assuming that right now there are 100 famous popular musicians. And that's not exactly true. They might right now be 100, whatever reason they came up with. The trade magazines, radio stations decide every week we'll announce and we will play throughout the week the top 100 records. No one in the country is going to like all 100, or even if it was 50. You're not going to like them. Nobody else is. Plus, all of you should know, the only reason I'm doing this is that some of your own partnerships may think that this is one exception, that pop culture seems to have expanded this, and it really hadn't. Well, a matter of degree, but it hadn't expanded enough to in any way approach being an exception, because of the 100 people right now. If you look down the list of the top 100 records in the country, you do know that if you wait 3 months and go back and look at the list, then go back 6 months from now, a year from now, the majority of that 100 people are never heard from again. You won't remember what it was, even if you kept up with it and you listen to the radio. It is that ordinary consciousness cannot look out and perceive the fact that life has a very limited need for rich and famous people in my field. And then you look around, it has a very limited need for rich and famous people in any field. Hence, the big payoff. That is why it is worth so much. That is why a Picasso comes along and seems to sit out there and fool around. And there are people in life's body that look at, for instance, since I picked him out and said, my God, the man can't draw. People who listen to Beethoven's original music. People listen to Thelonious Monk said, the man can't play. I don't care what, he just can't play. Then ends up a Picasso, sits around, has wife and mistress after wife and mistress, hangs around in his shorts out in this barn. He just seems to paint, does anything he wants to, and he makes more money than God could spend. In the country, the world was full of people who thought they could paint, that looked at that and said, I don't understand it. And they could not see that life has a very limited need for rich and famous painters. Right then it needed X amount, and he happened to be one of them. But since it's such a limited need, the payoff is tremendous. Everybody knows this story. It happens every year a few times, at least. A 50-year-old housewife, some way, accidentally, gets a manuscript in the hands of some New York agent's brother-in-law. And he, in some way, gets his brother-in-law drunk enough to read part of it. A few months later, suddenly, the woman has got a book that sold 1.5 million copies in hardcover. The movie rights have gone for $2 million, and she went from being a housewife in Fort Lee, New Jersey, to being rich and famous. And it seems to encourage other people, to say the least. Good grief, that woman did it. And she was making money, 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 money. Here are these kids. They got somebody to listen to them, and they admit, they call themselves punk rockers, or they seem to revel in the fact that they don't have any experience, or some of them say they don't have any talent, and they got a number 5 record in the country. Let's see, and I checked with my attorney, know something about showbiz law. These guys, just off the sale of the record, the way it's going, they're going to take in $3.5 million. That's where I should be. All you got to do is have one record, one book. The hell with a follow-up if from then on, if I do disappear, if that woman, you never hear of her again, so what? She can look at life and go, her next book nobody wants to publish, so what? She's already made $3 or $4 million. The payoff is big, but nobody sees why. Oh, they can describe it in all sorts of ways. They can describe it economically, but I'm telling you why the payoff is so big. Life needs so damn few of them. It's got to be big. But there's more going on here, you should note, than simply fiscal payoffs. There are other payoffs. Being rich and famous is more than just being rich and famous. It has a molecular effect on those people. It is a real effect. Now, all of you have read enough gossip columns, and some notice that I grew up with so-and-so. And then he wrote a book, and it became famous. We had our 10th class reunion party at our high school, and he came back, and we couldn't stand the son of a bitch. Boy, has he changed. Surprise, surprise. But don't worry about, well, now he's just rich, and he come up in a limousine, and he's got all this money. Being rich and famous affects one molecularly. People are not just after fame and riches. This might be what they say they're after. But the dream that I will have a hit record, the dream that I will be the new Bennett or Sinatra or Streisand. I can put on one-person shows, and I walk out and I fill up halls of 60,000 people, pay $40. What you dream of, without knowing it, is the molecular effect that you assume it will have. You call it rich and famous. Any of you with those kind of interests, you do know, I'm going to tell you again, I just encourage you just as much as I can. Because I've also, along the way, tried to point out to you, sort of indirectly, I guess, thus far, when I point out that real interest, since a lot of people always want to ask me, I believe I've got an interest in being a musician or a writer or this or that. Do you think it's just my imagination? The way I used to try and explain it, which is still a fair gauge, is it's something you can do that does not require an audience. Can you sit there, even if you're working on a symphony? There's no doubt that if you're reasonable at all, someday you'd like to hear somebody perform it, or be able to afford a Kurzweil or something to program it. But everybody wants to hear the symphony done, but for years and years. Charles Ives and people like that supposedly would sit around and just write them, and could hear them somewhere up here. But it did not require an audience. Or if you're trying to paint, I'm by no means saying that you should keep your paintings hidden somewhere. If you can sell them, if people like them, all that is fine. But the real basic gauge, if you insist on having one, is other than all of that, can you got free time, can you go home, go out in the garage, put on dirty Levi's and start painting, and there's nothing in the world you'd prefer to be doing right then? and that you can understand what I mean, that the enjoyment does not depend on an audience. Somebody may come by that you know and say, God, I still love your stuff. And that's fine enough. Your wife or husband or girlfriend, boyfriend may say, ooh, I love that. But if they never do, if nobody ever sees it, if nobody ever comments, and that's still your hobby, and you just love it, then you got something. But notice, I think I'll drag out a few more. But this, you should find very non-verbally interesting, that humanity is wired up as a whole not to notice that statistically, and as much as I pick on statistics, I shouldn't, because they've always had a kind word for me. Statistical proof in the 3D world is proof enough. That's the kind of proof that should kick one in the teeth. But people will leave their home in Kansas and Montana, go to the Big Apple, just convinced that they're going to become the greatest dancer on Broadway, the greatest singer, and they're supposed to, a certain amount of them. But statistically, the proof is right in front of you all the way from pre-Roman times up until today. At any given time, life only needs a small handful of famous singers and dancers. And anybody interested in dancing, you could name them right now. 50 years ago, your mother could have named them. She'd had an interest. At any given time, there's only 5 or 6 famous composers. And that's it. And it's always been that way. Don't worry about the exact number. But just a handful. That's all that life needed. That is fine. Everybody thinks what the field they're in, I should be up there. I can be there. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. That wasn't the point. Statistically, though, which is real 3D proof, like it or not, there's almost that possibility. Because life only needs, it's obvious. All you got to do is look. It only needs just a few at any given time. That's all it needs. But notice how beautiful the arrangement is, even though people don't see it, and you got millions of people believing that they can be in that select group, whereas statistically it's proven they can't. Life doesn't need them. But the payoff is so big, the feel in each person, that molecularly, of course they call it fame and fortune, but molecularly what I think would happen to me, it keeps millions of people attempting to do it, when the possibility of it happening to any one person is about that. And you think life doesn't know what it's doing. Well, I'm talking about such matters. Unrealized, unseen certainties, such as the certainty, it's just a certainty, I can say almost certainty, of any individual becoming rich and famous in any particular field is about that. That's an almost certainty. If I must remind some of you newer people, this is not sociological comment, nor satire, nor sarcasm. It's the reality behind this that people do not notice. But first, let me point out some other things that people do not notice. They're right in front of you. As I said, this is not an attack, and this is not social comment. I just want to mention a few more, and you realize that this is not the way, once I point out, I'll assume all of you will say, yeah, I see what you mean. And this is not the way human consciousness is wired up to operate. And you forget about it. And you take what seems to be a certainty when it's not. But you take it as it is said to be. While I was talking, just several came to mind. There are continual attacks, comments. People make a living off of being TV critics. I see big old fat books in library shelves. Commentaries, sociological commentaries on the effect of television on the American society, circa 1950 to 55. And then somebody else picks it up at 56 to 58. A continuing barrage, letters to the editor and papers, people sitting around at bars talking about the poor quality of entertainment on television. Just everybody says that. Anybody that wants to pass for being just even an Alabama intellectual will say, Jesus. Even though they may secretly watch it, they'll say, can you believe that one of the longest running shows on television was the Dukes of Hazzard? The A-Team? They attack the quality of entertainment on television. Television does not operate on the basis of providing entertainment. It's there to make a profit. What they're there to do is to sell commercial time. The way they sell commercial time is between the commercials, they put on something that's supposed to make you turn on, because as far as they can tell, nobody will sit there and watch commercials. They're trying it, but until now it's not been assumed. That is a simple fact. The networks, which has always been the heart up until now of the television industry, the networks, even though they have these great departments, these huge buildings in Hollywood and New York, these whole departments, heads of the departments, vice presidents, making up into six figures, the creative departments, thousands of people involved with that. But that's not the purpose. That is, to them, just a necessary evil. They are not there to provide entertainment. They're there to sell commercial time. It's no secret, except the mind will not operate on that basis. It has now become an accepted reality that television is for entertainment. Oh, you got to put up with damn commercials. But that is the whole purpose. It is not NBC and CBS and ABC's purpose. Nowhere. They did not get formed. People, the stockholders, those that understand, they're not there to provide entertainment. Entertainment is there to provide the impetus for people to buy commercials, to buy the time. That's it. It's there to make a profit. People attack the newspapers. Every city has people attacking their newspapers. In plenty of cities, you can look at them and say, I have sit down and counted the column inches, the space, and this paper, here in this city, with X amount of millions of people, provides, it takes me 10 minutes to read all the news. The column inches taken up by news is 1/5 of the total column inches in the paper. The rest of it is what? Damn advertising. And half of what they got, they pick up off the wire services. They're too cheap. They won't even send out reporters. It's as though, of course you believe the purpose of a newspaper is to provide news. And it's not. It's to sell advertising space. But if it was all advertising, they have, and correctly so I would suspect, up until now, found column inches in the paper. The rest of it is what? Damn advertising. And half of what they got, they pick up off the wire services. They're too cheap. They won't even send out reporters. It's as though, of course you believe the purpose of a newspaper is to provide news. And it's not. It's to sell advertising space. But if it was all advertising, they have, and correctly so I would suspect, up until now, found out that people would not go to the trouble of buying a newspaper, much less to sit down and read it when it was all ads. But the purpose of the newspaper is not to enlighten you. It is not to inform anybody. It's not to present the news. It's to sell advertising. And the people that are going to pay money for advertising want to know how many people are buying this newspaper. And so they put in what's called the news. And yet ordinary consciousness believes that that's the purpose. And look at the cottage industries. Look at the offshoots, since life operates in such a profitable and efficient manner. As I said, that there are now people who make their living over criticizing TV, criticizing newspapers, their think tanks, their departments, and all the major universities, journalism departments. You can get, I assume by now, a PhD in journalism. There are people who sit around with boards and committees that oversee, they say, or try to keep track of the level of professionalism of the news service, the journalism society in our country. And in a sense, there is no such thing. Of course, it's not true, because now there is. But in a sense, there's not. But I want to learn how to be a good journalist. In a sense, it's to learn how to become cannon fodder to a newspaper. You're just an absolute necessary evil. And yet human consciousness cannot operate continually on that basis. Remember, this has nothing to do with attacks on TV or newspapers. But there are absolute blatant certainties. There's no secret. It's not a conspiracy. It's just as I described it. The purpose of television, the industry, is to make a profit. The way that they attempt to make their profit is what? Through putting out, throughout the hour, periodic little spurts that they call entertainment. That this molecular movement, visually, orally, that they hope will make enough people, enough of these organisms, that not only have molecular structures in their nervous system, but they have molecular structures. They're made up of cotton and ink. They're known as dollar bills. That they'll get up off this and they'll go spend it through what's going on. All these molecules operating there, coming out of that cathode tube and out of the little speaker. But it's now a whole other reality that television is an entertainment media. Newspapers are an informative media. And it's all to make money, which is fine. But notice, life has it operating on one basis. Those involved with it, the accountants, those that get to be CEOs at CBS, the New York Times and Post, they understand I got to make a profit or my ass is gone. They understand that. And then they understand, in a sense, all right, we've got to make our product attractive enough that people will tune it in or buy it at the newsstand or subscribe to it. And then there are people who believe that they're making a living. That life has put them in the position that they are now an offshoot. I'm a critic. I teach this in college. But all this is going on simultaneously, but ordinary people cannot conceive, they cannot hold the consciousness of the fact continually that it's sort of funny for me to laugh at so-called quality of entertainment on television because it's a byproduct. That's not the point of television being on. Or to look at the newspaper and say, ooh, what sorry reporting and so little of it. That's not the purpose. And yet you can't think about it that way. You're not supposed to. Again, it's not a conspiracy. Any of you newer people that still got such idiotic demons in you think there's a conspiracy going on, hit the road. Life doesn't need conspiratorial humans. If you understood it, that's funny. That there are mortal conspiracies going on, that life needs people to help it. Paragraph 6. November the 20th, 1986, approaching the planet X, where no, oh, never mind. Bravely going where all sorts of men have gone before. That just struck me as kind of a nerdy version of the Star Trek people. Bravely going out where lots of people have gone before. Haven't they, Dr. Spock? If not, let's go somewhere else. Paragraph 6. City lovers versus ruralists. Since so many people like my recent historical hand grenades and references, I guess we don't have to be stuck with just with atomic physics and religion. How about history? There has been a continuing division, as you might suspect, as always, into two groups that surely somewhere along the line it's been observed before what I'm saying, but that's neither here nor there. That you could look at humanity even up until today is being divided up into groups that seem to be city lovers and those who seem to be ruralists. If you need to, I'll throw this out right quick. There'll be other examples. And again, this is not the point. We're not here studying history in some way because I'm not a history teacher by any means. But one example. Take the area of Greece, the era of Greece in its heyday. That now it's an accepted fact in the Western world that that was the cradle of our civilization. That was when humanity really became civil. But at the same time, there are recorded notes and recollections. There's some history of what was going on in Europe, Northern Europe, and Europe as we know it today, which to us, a little closer in horizontal history, would seem to be more progenitors of our society, our intellect, our arts, than it would even be Greece. But at any rate, simultaneously, just one example that comes to mind generally. When you had all the Goth brothers, the Visses and the Ollies and the Franks and all those people in Northern Europe were still picking their nose in public. You had the Greeks that had, by all reports, let's just take the reports as they come down to us, was the height of Western civilization. Arts, poetry, civility, love of language, love of the arts. But among other things I could point out, one, the difference between them and what was going on in Northern Europe then would be that the Greeks, just as a whole, seemed to be city lovers, that they, for whatever reason, we're not going to right now, that these people seemed to all want to get together and live in a city. Whereas you had all the Goths, all the people that was populating Northern Europe then, were ruralist. And by all reports, when every time they had any reason to come in contact with each other, it always produced some kind of conflict. If they did come into the towns, they were a very rowdy bunch. They didn't seem to understand how to be civil, to take care of the public properties. They're the kinds of people that would go in to a Athens museum and knock over statuaries, spit into pottery, do graffiti on restroom walls, that sort of thing. And I could say, remember, we're not really talking about history. Remember that, you people. But I could say that that would be one of the reasons that Greece was flourishing at that time, when contemporaneously Northern Europe were hundreds of years behind. Now, remember, we started talking about history. We're not talking about sociological or horizontal sociological affairs either. Right now, I could say there is a difference, not dissimilar, between, let us say, New York City and Birmingham, Alabama. Not just Birmingham, but I use Alabama, some of you know, a lot of times just in general, to reflect something internally in man, that there is a difference, not dissimilar, between what I'm saying, those to the Grecian era and them compared to those in Northern Europe, that amounts to people in last body that seem to be drawn into the love of a city, of being close to other people, of there being some kind of continual communal contact, that there be a kind of continual interplay, a place where Socrates can arise and have somebody to talk about, whereas if Socrates had arisen, which, remember, this is an act B, I can make it sound like it could have happened, but it couldn't. But if he had come out of one of the Hun tribes, and he started going around trying at the village to talk to people like Socrates supposedly did to the men of Athens, you can imagine what would happen. Well, it'd be all the way from them trying to ignore him, make fun of him, they'd probably finally push him in the fire. The people that I'm referring to as ruralists did not, and still do not, have that sort of taste. Looked at it a certain way, this should be self-evident. People do not decide, I want to make my name as a famous dancer or singer. I think I'll move to Sand Mountain, Alabama. I'll save all my money. If Mom and Dad will let me drop out of school, I might as well go now and get on the right course. I know it'll be hard. I know that Sand Mountain is just full of other singers and dancers, but hell, I'll stick it out. The movie and the TV show Fame, you notice, is not set in Sand Mountain, Alabama. There is something specifically at work, and I repeat one more time, I am not talking about the arts, I'm not talking about history, I'm not talking about sociology. It just seems, I'm just talking about the surface of it, that there is something going on afoot inside of life's body that does make people, even now, and I don't have to just use New York and Alabama, but that now it is still playing itself out. Right now it is commonly referred to as undeveloped countries, third world countries. It's all a matter of degree. It's not just that certain groups now are disadvantaged. That's not that description. I'm not arguing what's going on. That's not the point. What I'm trying to get you to see is that it's always been true that in life's body, that is on this planet, there have been city lovers and ruralists. And they both have their own ramifications tied to them. They have to do with nutrition even. They have to do with living conditions. They have to do then in the areas that become more and more at the line that I used to draw for some of you back on the nervous system, not just line level consciousness, but I could draw it and say that there's a line cutting civilized man from uncivilized man, cutting a New York dweller from an Alabama dweller, cutting the liberal from the conservative in the mechanical sense now. I'm not talking about anything that a person has produced on their own, but the mechanically the ways within last body that humanity has been operating is cut up into city lovers and ruralists, and they're both serving a purpose. We would be in sad shape if we were dependent upon the kinds of people trying to break in to Broadway Theater right now in Manhattan, if suddenly all the farmers in the breadbasket of America were wiped out by a plague and we sent all these people out there to raise food. We would be in bad shape. I hope that you wouldn't sit around and wait 6 months for bread and corn and stuff to be on the shelves down at the A&P. They'd be out there dancing around and singing and hooping, wonder what in the hell's going on. And by the same token, if we suddenly run the poor kids and the chorus line people out of New York and we brought in a whole bunch of farmers, we started sticking them in Cats and whatever the up-to-date shows are, and we put them in all the nightclubs and saying, sing, damn it, dance, damn it. I suggest that business, especially the tourist business, those who love the arts, would fall off dramatically. They are both serving a purpose. Now, as always, I'd like to ask you to try and put this in a neural package and swallow it. That all of this is true internally. It's true in certain degrees with everybody. But you people, it is true in a degree in which you have got to see it. You've got to see the reality of it. And it's not whether one is better than the other, and it's not that there should be a preponderance necessarily, one compared to the other. But in all of you, if you belong in this, there is a city lover that there is no excuse for. He or she is just as slick, needs to be, figuratively speaking, New York, Paris, needs to be there. Needs to be in the kind of place like Manhattan, going on 24 hours a day. Always some kind of excitement. Always something artistically happen, even if it sucks. Even if it only happens once. You want to be there if you got nothing else to do. You want to be trying to contribute. Hell, I can do that bad. I'll do it. But there is also the ruralist, whose opinion of such things you can imagine. Just imagine a good old 50-year-old high school educated wheat farmer in Nebraska. Just to make him an archetype. And imagine his opinion over people living in Coldwater Flats, down in the village, starving, dreaming that they're going to be on Broadway finally, just getting a chorus line, and they find out that they make $120 a week. That's what that poor girl, that's what that poor boy has been putting up with for years and years, and doing all those ungodly, unspeakable acts, and that's all they're after. And then it may close in the night. It's insanity. There is that ruralist in all of you. Now, thirdly, as always, is to what possible ends, to what possible purposes does life have humanity so arranged? I want to mention something that strikes all of you still specifically. Just one possible way for me to approach it. I'm going to approach it tonight very quickly. Me describing the absolute material, molecular basis of all of life, including so-called consciousness. Trying and succeeding at times in getting you to see instantaneously that the old division, the old argument between the division of people referring to my mind, my personality, and my body, and etc., that there is no such division. The increasing interest that medicine seems to show, that is, life is showing through certain people, into what is consciousness, and is brain consciousness, is consciousness brain, that no matter what terms you use, we're talking about molecular reactions, whether it's you seeing me, whether it's you hearing me, whether it's you touching your sexual partner, whatever it is coming through the senses. If in fact you were a mystic, as they're called, and you heard the voice of God, you would hear him through molecular means. There is nothing exempt from this in this dimension. I will assume that all of you can hear that when I say it. When I've gone through these descriptions that not much more complicated than I just did. That whatever's going on, it causes a molecular change in your nervous system, or else you're unaware of it. That if you were unconscious, or if you blew out your eardrums, and the voice of God spoke, you wouldn't hear him. At the time, all of you can sit there, and it's just obvious that that's true. And then you continue to operate. I see it, I know it, especially in personal relationships. You continue to operate then on the basis, without thinking about it, but you're operating on the basis that this is theoretically true, but it has almost no significance whatsoever in my personal life. To wit, as you continue to treat people around you, all the way from your family to your employers and employees, but especially inside of your sexual, your social relationships, that other people are directly responsible in some way, in a kind of personal way, as to what they do. That is, if somebody lets you down, if somebody disappoints you, if somebody seems to not give you the proper consideration, that in some way this person is either just willfully mistreating you, or perhaps even worse, they're subconsciously beginning to resent you, they're subconsciously beginning to have a roaming eye, they're subconsciously beginning to get tired of you and they just can't admit it, they don't want to admit it. That the other person in some way is suddenly, not suddenly, you always thought it, but in complete disregard for the fact that you can sit here and hear me point out to you that everything is molecularly based, everything including this, but that suddenly this other person, they've been very short with me for the last few days. I notice it. I bet unconsciously, at the very least, they're getting tired of me. That in some way, this other person has suddenly become an exception. That they are totally free-willed. They do have, as life has told everybody else right now, a conscious mind and an unconscious mind, and either they are willfully mistreating me, and about to willfully mistreat me even worse, or else it's happening and even they don't know it, which is probably worse. All the way from this to being pissed. What a waste of my time. What a waste of your possibility to understand something, to see something as clearly as me saying. Whatever is occurring with somebody, it is a molecular activity, and for you, and this is the most extant and most pressing danger for you people, is somebody close to you, is that this other person is in some way exempt from this, to totally forget about that. And you begin holding them responsible. You begin fearing that they're responsible. You begin fearing, of course you're really returning to your erstwhile fears before you came here, that things are going to happen on a level that you can't control, even they can't control. But in some way it is personality based. That inside this other person, my male or female sex mate, inside is a little Fred or a little Mary. They're either in there plotting, or they may be walking around now criticizing me all the time, getting mad. Every time I come home and they seem a little short or distracted, I know what it is. It's either willful or even worse perhaps, there's subconscious messages they're saying to me, and it's no such thing. Oh, it might be such a thing, but they call it such a thing, you done missed it. You're about to noun yourself to death. You've missed the whole secret. You've missed the possibility of seeing what's going on in life. By letting the yellow circuit come to a conclusion. They're mad at me. They're getting tired of me. They're angry at me and I probably deserve it, or they're angry at me and I don't deserve it. What a shame. What a waste. And I say, I hate to call down curses and make portents, but I say the forces are going to get you for wasting my goddamn time. I'm not going to bother with it. I'm not going to try to get you. But I believe that you're going to pay for this. Or come to think about it, you're already paying for it. That's right, I forgot. That's right, I feel better. Forget the whole thing. I feel better. I hadn't thought about it that way. Yeah, all right, good enough. How the hell were you? Yeah. All right, last thing I thought I'd mention. Again, I'm applying an example that happens and continues to happen in life, but I am not talking about history, religion, or anything else. I'm using the shell of it. I'm using the three-dimensional reflection of it. This example goes on. I know it's happened in fiction. I'm aware it's happened in fiction. I can't quote what. But then it's happened in real life. Somebody will state, somebody will insinuate that they have uncovered some new, I'm just picking out one example that has nothing to specifically do with this religion. I'm just picking out a prime example, an easy example. Somebody will say, I have access to some scrolls that have just been discovered in certain caves in the Sinai Desert. They've been translated. It took us 6 years. You won't believe the problems we had. We're verifying it right now down to the final detail. And we expect to announce through legitimate academic or religious means by the first of the year our findings. And I'm going to tell you what, it's going to shake the foundations of Christianity. Those stories go back, like I said, I'm just picking out one. I could pick it out any other religion and said the same thing. But all of you should know those sorts of things have been going on nearly 2,000 years, and they're going on right now. Is what brought that example to mind. Is I just read that again in the last 48 hours. And now I can't even remember what it was. But almost that same quote again is somebody saying, we're not prepared to say what it is, but very shortly we're going to have an announcement. It's going to shake the foundations of Christianity. All right. Now, all of you can imagine, especially you with partnerships that believe in conspiratorial possibilities in human life, that the whole scenario of Jesus being crucified and all that was some kind of setup. They just made it up. It was all a big sham. It was a cover for some political activity, all those kinds of stories. And that now the truth's about to come out. Now somebody has come up with some kind of story saying, whatever it is, that Jesus didn't actually die. They put up somebody else on the cross. He got away. He married. He had children. He admitted right before he died he got drunk, and he turned to Peter and Paul and Goofy and everybody else and Sleepy, and he said, hey, I got to tell you the truth. I made up all that crap. I ain't the Son of God. I'm still the guy that was born. Go check. I was born down at such and such address down in Jerusalem or wherever it was. Something like that is what they have in mind, right? Remember now, this is not what we're talking about. It's not what I'm talking about. But they say that. And ordinary consciousness, you, yours, or somebody else can imagine what it could be that would shake the foundations. What if they do have written admission that Jesus did not believe he was the Son of God? Jesus did not believe that he was supernatural in any way. That all the stories about him doing miracles, that he and other guys made it up and passed it around. Not only do you have his written confession, you've got witnesses that signed it and gave a little blurb, their biography. It was bankers, carpenters, other reasonable people. It's just proof. Forget all these translations that went on 50 years after the fact, and all these so-called letters and parts that went into the New Testament. Here is proof that the whole thing was a sham, right? Let's just assume that that's the kind of thing that many people could imagine. What would it take to shake the foundations of Christianity? That would be it, right? Not hardly. There is nothing that would shake the foundations of Christianity. And I tried to make up as fast as I could talk the example, written confession of Jesus that the whole thing was a sham. He started off as a joke and it got out of hand, and he confessed it on his deathbed. And a string here of people that we've got a history of, known, reasonable people in the community, 50 of them, 150, said we witnessed it, we couldn't believe it, we're just as heartbroken as we can be. But the man said it. He said he wanted to say it before he died just in case there was a God. He was kind of frightened about the whole affair and ashamed of it. And he said that. This whole thing has been a sham. It would shake the foundations of Christianity. Not hardly. It's not possible. But now, remember, we're not talking about Christianity. We're not talking about history. We're talking about the way life operates. Because here's what I wanted to try and point toward. It's no longer merely a matter of what could be, quote, proven. Because now, to use this example, so-called Christianity, taking that as being a something, a noun, operating at a little higher speed, almost a verb, but a thing, an institution, a process, a reality. Now, historically, it's not a matter in some way of something to be proven, because now this thing, this process we're calling Christianity, that is called Christianity, has its own unshakable, lineal, horizontal history. And it is not subject to now proof. It is untouchable. As I said, that's just many things. Judaism, government, all forms of so-called human institutions. But people believe that it's possible that something could come up that would shake the very foundations of blank. Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Western civilization. Now that's pretty broad. That's why I picked out the example of Christianity. That ordinary consciousness, once I started this example and brought up the quote of people saying we have discovered something that will shake the foundations of Christianity, that if I'd stop and say, all right, what could that be? All of you could have come up with something. Well, if it could be proven, for instance, maybe I made it too complicated. If it could be proven that Jesus didn't actually live, boy, would that shake the foundation. That does away with it. It'd crumble. It'd collapse. You need the dumbbell around your neck again so we can hear you coming. It literally is not the word, of course, but if you could take literally into a right angle dimension from here, it literally is moot. You understand, I can talk some more. It can't be proven. Even if they had 150 eyewitnesses that said he never lived, or he did live and he admitted the whole thing was a joke. You understand, that won't work. It's not going to happen. But if it did happen, if somebody showed up with it, it's not going to work. The church wouldn't even bother to refute it, probably. The Pope probably wouldn't take turn. If he heard something about it, he'd say, somebody write me a quick abstract of that, a couple of sentences, let me know what's going on. And he might forget to ever ask again. Just because they told him, there's some people there got proof, archaeologically sound proof that Jesus didn't even exist, or he announced this whole thing. He'd go, oh yeah, well, it's irrelevant. Because now this thing has its own lineal history. And it is not subject to what is ordinarily referred to as proof or disproof. It's not subject to it. It's immune to it. But another aspect of this, if you can hear this gets complicated, and I'm not sure I want to spend any more time with it. There are different kinds of proof in a timely manner. It's me saying Christianity as a thing now has its own lineal, horizontal history, and it is not subject to proof. That is opposed to, you got to listen quick though, that would be as opposed to instant, now reality, which has to be something that can be proven and accepted right now. I was afraid you'd miss it. All right, try it this way. I say that Christianity, to use my example, is now beyond the realms of being shaken. It could have been shook a long time back. Now I'm just going to pick out a general area, which it doesn't matter. It could have been shook. When was Jesus supposedly killed? 33 BC? All right, sometime in 34 BC, Christianity could have been shook. if he was supposedly died on July the 4th, 33 A.D., I mean, on July the 5th, let's say right after he died, let's just say, that suddenly all these people went, hey, let's start Christianity. Boy, wasn't that something. The gods came here in person again for the first time since the Greeks. Wasn't that great? Let's start a religion. We'll have fun. And then within 24 hours, a guy comes up and he says, hey, we went over there to the tomb after it was all over, and he wasn't really dead yet, and he signed this confession that he made all this crap up. He didn't believe he was the Son of God. And me and all my friends here, reputable, sane, sober people, then it could have been shook, but that's what I'm talking about. It has to be a now reality. That's when things are proven and accepted. It could have been shook. As I said, it could possibly have been shook in 34 A.D. It could have possibly been shook in 100 A.D. But it can't be shook now because it is not subject to now proof. And that's what they would have. Even if they found something, it could be carbon dated or through whatever means, proving that these scrolls were written at about the time they're reputed to be written, that they're dated 35 A.D. And we have evidence of some kind. If it's not scientific evidence, it's historical evidence that was actually done right then. That this is not forgeries, these things were written. It was eyewitness reports of Jesus refuting all these stories. You got to understand, they've just been found. They're talked about now. It amounts to it as a now proof. It's not a then proof, and it's too late. If there's going to be in the horizontal, the sequential world, something that apparently can be proven or disproven, and the results be accepted by some segment in some area of life's body, it has to be now. That's the only time you can, quote, shake the foundations of something. That's the only time you can disprove something. Once it has taken on a kind of lineal history, such as Christianity has, nobody's going to shake its foundations. The worst scenario that you could imagine, which I guess is mine, if there was some historical proof that you would think, well, anybody, I'm not partial one way or the other about Christianity, and you look at it and think, there's no doubt, this is just proof nobody named Jesus existed. I mean, here the details here was a kind of fraud. And let's just say that you assume, being a reasonable person, this is the worst possible scenario, and this will qualify as shaking the foundations of Christianity. This just blows it out of the water. You might as well shake your dumbbell so they'll hear you coming, because it's not going to do any such thing. And I repeat again, we're not talking about Christianity. We're not talking about any of that stuff, are we? No, Daddy. I'm talking about the way life operates. And that which can seem to be an absolute reality, and religion is a good one because it seems to the ordinary consciousness to be so important that such matters as being able to prove or disprove some foundation or the heart of a so-called religion. Once the religion has, I guess we could use ordinary terminology and say, taken on a life of its own, if you think something human, if you think life itself is going to turn on itself once it has built up something that obviously is that important for some reason, whether you see it or not, but then suddenly its foundations are going to be shook, you are a dreamer. You might as well keep reading those conspiratorial books. You do believe that the world is going to come to an end. You do believe that evil forces are afoot. You do believe that men in some way can be involved in chicanery that will even surprise life. Or as your forefathers would have it, that suddenly these people out in the desert are worshiping a golden calf or something, and suddenly, and this group are the ones that claim they made up the idea of one God that knows it all, says it all, that suddenly he goes, what? And does a double take? Are you people down there worshiping a cow again? Good grief. But notice, those stories are everywhere. And you take them as being all right. It's human consciousness simply magnified. I like the idea of the old good Judaic God doing a double take. But that's the same thing. That's the same thing as this will shake the foundations of Christianity. It's the same ball game, the same program. Is old Jehovah going, da-da-da. What? It's the same thing. It's not a matter of did it happen or didn't it happen? It's a matter that it couldn't happen, except in a 3D world. There's a time that everything, speaking on an ordinary level, has got to either be proven, disproven, accepted, rejected by some area of life's body, whether it be one group of people, one race, one religion, one nationality, or it could be just one time zone. That something, whatever we'd be talking about, a scientific reality, a sociological accepted mores, a psychological standard of behavior, it must operate in a timely manner. It is as subject to time as leaving eggs out in the sun. It has to operate in a timely manner to be, quote, now I'm just speaking on an ordinary level right now, to either apparently, quote, be proven, disproven, quote, accepted, rejected. Now remember that we weren't talking about religion or history. How could you put that in a silver bullet? How could you swallow that? I'll give you a few seconds. Would you like for me to go ahead and answer it? Yes, Daddy. All right. When is the last time that something was proven or disproven to you? Let's tell the truth now. You don't remember. When was the last time you accepted or rejected something? I'm not talking about another piece of pie. I'm talking about accepted. I embrace this religion. My forefathers were right. This religion is nuts. My father is just deluded, coming from the old country and being a ruralist instead of a city lover like me. These kind of political ideas. What you apparently, this is all still apparently, but what you apparently accepted or rejected as being either proven or unproven, the last time that happened to any of you on an ordinary level, oh, I don't know. Some of you, it might have lasted up until you're 21, 22, but that was relatively a peripheral area. It might have seemed at the time that you had accepted a new political persuasion while you were in college, that you sort of took on, let us say, a certain kind of left-wing Marxist attitude toward what you believe should be the right structures of human government. It may have seemed that way. But what I'm telling you is, what you absolutely, apparently rejected and accepted as being proven or disproven, the heart, to speak on what seems to be in political areas, that was already established. And you should be able to hear what I'm saying. I'm not just trying to prove I'm right. And back to the question, when's the last time that something was proven or disproven to you? The truth is, you can't really remember. It's been so fucking far back. Isn't that true? Yes, Daddy, that is true. That's the way things are supposed to be. Now my question is, if you could see this information, if you could remember this information, what in the world might you be able to do with it? I don't know, Daddy. And if you're going to tell me, you got to prove it to me. Remember, there are two areas that can appear to be different types of proof. After the fact, too far after the fact, you cannot shake the foundation. Christianity can no longer be disproved. The existence of Jesus cannot be disproved, even if it could. The existence of Moses, the flight of the Jews from Egypt, if that could be proven to be a hoax, that somebody made it up, what would be its effect? If they found out that this guy called Buddha was a traveling salesman, and these things that come out as being these great teachings, they start out being variations on, did you hear the one about the traveling salesman? His ox cart broke down, and he stopped for the night. And these jokes, the other Indian princes They're the people to whom he was trying to sell whatever a traveling salesman was sold back 500 BC or whenever, that he tried to expand them, and it turned into the so-called teachings of Buddha. If in some way that could be proven to someone's satisfaction, what effect would that have on Buddhism? If something is going to be proven or disproven just at the ordinary level, it has to operate in another time zone. That is, it has to be timely. It is a now reality. And once it gets established, once it gets a foothold, like the belief in Moses and the Red Sea parting, like the belief in Jesus being killed and he wasn't actually dead, that's got to be established in a timely manner. And I'm not going into what, the timely manner, whether it's a month, a week, a year. Plus there has to be enough people accept it. And I'm not going to tell you whether it's 50 people or 500 or 5,000. But it has to be proven or disproven in a timely fashion. And after that, it's a dream that we're going to shake the foundations. There's nothing will shake the foundations of something that it's too late to prove or disprove. Because now, Christianity, Judaism, all the religions, it's beyond the realm of mortal proof, acceptance, or rejection. You individually can say, I think all religion is a hoax. You can say that if you want to, if you have to. You can say that one particular religion strikes you as being odious, fraudulent. If you're wired up to say that, you can say it. And you might go out and find proof that this religion is a hoax. And if you think that's going to make you rich and famous, welcome to the chorus line. I repeat, can you see any possible use for this? Well, don't give me the blues and actually answer, of course. But how about what you take, what your own molecular system, your own nervous system, intakes every day as being information? All the heat, all the distraction, all the visuals, the tactiles that you take as being energy of all sorts that comes in. Is it proven? Has it already been proven? You no longer have to look at it. Has it been disproven? Could it be disproven at this late date? Not through ordinary means. How about how much of your partnership, without you having ever used these words or these terms before, believe that it's possible that information is going to come along, says the partnership. It's possible if I could find it, if I could find that damn secret book, would shake the foundations of all this idiocy to which the rest of humanity is subject. Something would shake the foundations and wake up the rest of sleeping humanity. These poor fools. As long as you believe that, perhaps you should run for office. You might be a natural-born leader of those fools, I might add. Or they might use you as the poster boy for those fools. Shake the very foundations. Of course, to believe that you can shake the very foundations, I could also tie this in to my beginning of last week, which will make a nice little non-boundaried surface. I started last week, as you recall, pointing out that there are no cosmic truths, only the undisturbed infinite comment. The only thing that would shake the foundations of anything would be what? Did I hear somebody say a cosmic truth? I heard a partnership say that. If I knew the cosmic truths, it would shake the foundations of my own stupidity, my own ignorance. Your own ignorance is as well established as Christianity is. how are you going to ordinarily disprove the existence of you? Not only did Moses never part the Red Sea, I never did part my brother's head with a hatchet. Not only did Moses and the Israelis flee from Egypt, not only did that not happen, I did not flee from the drought. Not only did Jesus not actually live, me and all of my semi-questionable glory didn't actually exist. Those things that some people think I did, those things that I vaguely remember that I might have done, I didn't actually do those. At the ordinary level, you can't do that. You cannot shake the foundations, which is another step, if you can see, a little door about why so-called change is 2/3 of an illusion. There is a time that things must be proven or disproven. Of course, talking about us now, I wasn't going into it tonight, but then you get into the uncertainty principle, if we want to jump from history to physics, to where you can escape time. Because the only way that there is a steady, continual appearance of time is you have got to know the apparent position and momentum of your own sense of existence, the own part of you that seems to be examining this situation. Without that, there is no time. Of course, there is no time to kind of standard that I have been enumerating about the necessity of having a correct time for something to be proven or disproven. That becomes then transcendable, escapable. But as always, I knew I was getting too convoluted, but as always, it's not a matter of finding the answer, is it? It's not a matter of becoming cured, is it? It's a matter of not having a question, isn't it? It's a matter of not being sick, right? Then the old question. You make it sound so easy. You make me feel so young, but how? Told you how. Told you how again tonight. Told you how and shall.